Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to G2 Gaming with me, the Gandy Man, and today we are looking at my first of hopefully many For Honor videos. Now, before we get started, I have lightly followed this game since its announcement at E3 2015. The concept was right up my alley as I love the medieval time frame and the feudal Japan time frame with knights and samurais and all that kind of stuff. So I was excited, but my lack of knowledge on the game did not push me to really look forward to it as much as other games, say like Ghost Recon Wildlands or even The Division back in 2015 before that was released. It was a game I figured I would probably eventually get, but not at launch. But now after playing the closed beta and the open beta, I am completely sold. So with all of that being said, let's get into this video. Here is my own personal master guide for my favorite character in the game, the Orochi. Now, with the type of game For Honor is, it won't be long before everyone makes their own Orochi guides. In fact, I've already seen a lot of them for many different characters, including the Orochi. But I decided to make one anyway because I haven't really seen many guides where I actually like what they have taught and what they have shown for the Orochi. I was like, if somebody was going to try and learn and was having trouble learning the Orochi, I didn't think a lot of the guides really would help them understand the actual nature of the character. Now, some people might actually get help from those guides already on YouTube, but I wanted to make a more in-depth master guide than I have seen on YouTube already. So being a self-taught and self-professed decent to good Orochi player who has taught many of my friends how to play For Honor and defend against the Orochi, I felt like I was going to post my own Orochi guide. First things first, the Orochi is part of the Samurai faction as its assassin class character. It is described as an agile counterattacker and is considered a hard character to learn and to use. However, to be honest, in my opinion, the Conqueror from the Knights is actually more difficult. So let's go over its customization options quickly. Like every other character, you get unique reputation skins. This character can also be male or female as it's not exclusive to either gender. You've also got the ability to customize helm, chest armor, and arms like all the other characters as well. For the weapon, you have the blade, hilt, and guard to customize. My personal favorite is this Umehara blade with its red tinted blade. Now let's take a look at the Orochi's feats and the best uses for each. Its base feats are Bounty Hunter, Smoke Bomb, Longbow, and Nail Bomb. The second option feats are Kiai, Kunai, Sharpened Blade, and Fear itself. Finally, the third option feats are Iron Lungs, Revenge Attacks, Slip Through, and Arrow Storm. As you can see here, I was running Iron Lungs, Revenge Attacks, Sharpened Blade, and Nail Bomb. In the full game, I will probably change that to what I was running in the closed beta, which was Iron Lungs, Kunai, Sharpened Blade, and Arrow Storm. Now let's look at each tier one by one and what each is and does and the best ways to use them. After you rep as any character, you get multiple loadouts, so you'll be able to change these feats in each loadout for different game modes. So first option feats, Bounty Hunter, Smoke Bomb, Longbow, and Nail Bomb. Bounty Hunter is a passive level 1 feat that allows you to gain health and stamina when you kill another hero. However, you gain health and stamina after killing another hero with any character, so this feat allows you to gain slightly more health and fill your stamina bar. Now this also applies to when you're just randomly killing somebody or killing a hero instead of executing. All heroes, like I said before, gain health and stamina after every execution of another hero. The Orochi feat, on the other hand, allows you to get that health and get stamina back for just killing them, so you don't have to execute them. This feat is probably one of the ones that I use the least, though I may decide to put this feat in a loadout for 4v4 elimination or any other game mode outside of Dominion that allows you to use feats throughout the match. You won't need this feat in Dominion because there are other feats in this tier that are better suited to that mode. Smoke Bomb is a second level feat in battles. This feat is exactly what it says it is, a smoke bomb to use to break lock-ons. This also works against you as well, but with you knowing it's coming, you can use this with the Storm Rush if your enemy is close enough to hit them through the smoke. Again, I don't use this too much, but it is useful for escaping or ambush. Therefore, this feat would probably be best for Dominion. Next is Longbow, and it is your best friend or worst nightmare. Longbow allows you to shoot an arrow via a bow at your enemies for, quote, medium damage. However, it's mostly for a heavy damage. I've had countless moments, barely below half, fighting against other Orochis, and this attack has killed me. This feat does have an auto lock-on feature. If you activate this feat, you will have a crosshair show up on an enemy, and you hit the attack button to release the arrow. To be honest, you could use this feat in either Elimination or Dominion, but it is kind of cheap in 4v4 Elimination, since the objective is fighting your opponents versus Dominion's objective-based games. If you're in an elimination match and you run away to finish your enemy off with this attack, if you have chat on, prepare to be shamed. Many people take offense to using this in elimination and see it as cheap. Next is Nail Bomb, which is a trap dealing bleed damage in the area of effect. It's pretty much what it says it is. It's a bomb made up of nails and it explodes whenever you get into the radius. This is useful in Dominion mostly. Set this trap down in the middle of B, warn your team, and stay away. This trap deals a lot of damage to anyone, you and team included, if caught in the blast radius, and it causes bleed. 4v4 elimination, this is also viewed similarly to the longbow, but is not as bad. If your enemy runs into your trap, that's their fault for not paying attention. For the second option feats, you have Ki, Kunai, Sharpened Blade, and Fear itself. Ki is described as a scream that will stun nearby enemies. To be honest, I like this feat, but it isn't that effective, especially when used wrong, and not better than the third option level 1 feat. It is best to use this in 4v4 modes outside of Dominion, or other modes that is straight player versus player modes that allow you to use feats. It also works when your enemy is close enough to you. The next is Kunai, which is a throwing knife that deals, quote, light damage. As I mentioned earlier, this is my preferred level 2 feat, and I will probably be using this during the full release of the game. It does decent damage. I would say I would consider the damage more than just light, but not enough to classify as medium damage, or maybe like I explained before with longbow, this should say medium damage, and the longbow should say high damage or heavy damage. Anyways, like the longbow, it is more acceptable to use this feat in Dominion instead of 4v4 elimination, or maybe even skirmish when that's available in the full game. Like the longbow, you may be viewed as cheap if you use this as a fleeing shot at an enemy. The second third level feat is also my favorite of the third level feats, and maybe even my favorite overall. That is Sharpened Blade. It is described as attacks inflict low damage over time. The reason why this is my favorite isn't because it adds a bleed effect to any of your attacks, or to all of your attacks per se. Rather, it evens the score and playing field when fighting a Nobushi or Peacekeeper. Bleeding is one of the most useful but most annoying types of attacks in For Honor. A good Orochi will still be able to inflict bleed no matter the opponent using this feat. The fourth level, second feat option is Fear itself, where the enemies around you have lower stamina, regen, and defenses. If you ask me, I would say this is one of the least useful feats the Orochi has to offer. Probably suited best for Dominion or 4v4 elimination or skirmish. But compared to either the Nail Bomb or the third level option, or the third option, Arrow Storm, it's not a viable option. This feat is not a viable option. Like I said, you could probably use this feat effectively in either mode, but if you get into a position where you need or would want to use this, you'd be in a pretty dire and low survivor probability situation anyways, unless your enemies were fighting another player nearby. Now, you would use this to only affect the enemy you're fighting, but it seems to only be worth using against multiple enemies. Finally, we've got third option feats. Up first, and probably one of the most important for the Orochi, Iron Lungs. This feat allows you to run without stamina. Stamina is a very important part of For Honor. If you run out of it, your only option when fighting is to sit back and guard and hope you don't miss a guard or get guard broken. Dodging is still possible with the Orochi, but none of the counterattacks will be available. The Orochi's playstyle should and does revolve around speed, so having Iron Lungs will allow you to flee from your opponents faster than most other opponents. It is vital to your survival and success as an Orochi to be able to flee when at low health or out of stamina. The second level third option is Revenge Attacks, which builds your revenge meter when you attack. For the Orochi, depending on how you set up your gear, you oftentimes don't have the best revenge gaining abilities, especially since you can't guard as effectively as other non-assassin characters. So this feat can be useful in any mode, but probably more so in elimination and skirmish where you run the risk of fighting more enemies at once. So the mix of attacks building revenge and the defense building it will help a lot. However, personally, I feel kunai is still a more effective option when successful. The third level 3 option is Slip Through, which makes your attack stronger for a short time after dodging. This feat can and should be very useful, especially in elimination and skirmish, because the Orochi's best defense strategy should be dodging and dodging often. This feat can allow the Zephyr Strike to be even more deadly than normal. The fact that this feat is passive is even better. So much so that I wish this feat was in another slot so I don't have to sacrifice Sharpened Blade for it. That being said, this feat would be most suited for 4v4 elimination where you'll be fighting against other players single-handedly. The reason why I mostly won't be using this over Sharpened Blade is because Sharpened Blade does add bleed damage. Only downside is there is a pretty extensive cooldown. The final and last third option feat for level 4 is Arrow Storm, which is an aerial attack that deals medium damage in multiple areas. The Kensei has the same feat as well, but even though damage is considered medium, it does have the potential to kill you from full health if you're caught in the middle of it. It will kill you, your allies, and enemies. It's basically a barrage of 3 waves of arrows that go over an area you target. As such, this feat is best used when in Dominion to clear out Zone B. It will kill minions across the entire zone, but also friendly minions as well, so be wary. You can use this in 4v4 elimination or skirmish on unsuspecting enemies, but like kunai and longbow, may seem as a cheap tactic to other players. Now on to emotes and executions. I won't really go into much detail of this other than show them. None have any stats or added bonuses, but one of the reasons why the Orochi is one of my favorite characters is because of its executions. Also, please note that because this was captured in beta, not all executions and emotes are available on the list. My favorite execution is not available in the beta at all, so take a look. Next, we'll take a quick look at the progression of the Orochi. Here it is. It's not everything, but it goes on for quite a while, so you get an idea of how much you can unlock. Now we are going to move on to the Orochi's moveset and exclusive traits. First thing to take note of when you're playing with the Orochi is, as I said before, part of the assassin class, and everyone in the assassin class has what is known as defense reflex, where you cannot hold your guard up in any direction indefinitely. That is also the reason why dodging is so important to this character. Because dodging is so important, assassin classes are also better at deflex. Deflects are not exclusive to the assassins, as I know the Kensei can deflect, but also pretty sure every other character, with maybe the exception of the Warlord from the Vikings and the Conqueror from the Knights. But it is not as useful in any class but the assassins, as most assassin characters can get an unblockable counterattack off of a deflect. The Orochi does have an exclusive top light attack combo where your second top light attack is guaranteed if your first is successful. Now, with that being said, there is a pretty good way to chain a third if done right. If you do a successful top quick combo, usually your opponent, if they don't attack after your second attack, will try to block a third top attack. So you can switch it up and attack from either right or left after your second attack, and it is a quick third attack that would often be a part of a combo. A popular Orochi combo using this is a successful Storm Rush followed by the two top attacks. This next character specific is the Hurricane Blast cancel, which allows you to cancel the Hurricane Blast attack by either changing it at the last second to Wind Gust or going into a guard break or dodging out of it. Both Wind Gust and Hurricane Blast are unblockable attacks, but Hurricane Blast is tricky and still hard to land as it can be easily parried and countered, which, to be honest, I haven't quite figured out why yet. Hurricane Blast is on record as my favorite Orochi attack and my favorite attack for the For Honor game, period, and you'll see why soon. So now let's take a quick look at the moveset before jumping into practice and seeing the moves in action. Up first is Crosswind Slashes, which is a light attack chain that requires the first light attack to be successful. Remember with this, the top light attack combo. If your first attack is a top attack and your second is too, it will be successful regardless. Then all you need to worry about is where do you attack for the third attack. It is not recommended to do another top or third top attack. Next is Lightning Strikes Twice, which is two straight heavy attacks. I mostly use a top heavy followed by a side heavy with this move, but this is an effective finishing chain that more often than not will result in an execution prompt. Following Lightning Strikes Twice is the third and final chain, Tidal Wave Slashes. This chain is executed by beginning with a heavy attack, followed by a light attack that must hit in order to finish the combo with the final light attack. Again, the Orochi's top attack combo can come in handy here. Up next is Crashing Wave. You have to do this outside of being locked on and is executed by running at your opponent and when close enough pressing the heavy attack button. This can be useful when pursuing running enemies and when running at enemies trying to revive a downed ally. This is another attack that can lead to executions because usually your opponent will be fleeing when low on health. Now, moving down the list into the cooler and some of the more tricky attacks. Up next is Riptide Strike, which is similar to a Storm Rush that we'll cover in just a minute. You have to pull back on the left analog stick while moving your attack zone to the top zone, so right stick up and press the heavy attack button. If done correctly, your character will do a step back that, if performed at the right time, can also result in a dodge. And you will attack from the top zone as your character lunges forward. The damage from this attack is pretty solid, slightly more than a typical heavy attack, but slightly less than a successful Storm Rush. Because you are attacking ideally right after your enemy misses his attack and leaves him open. This is also a good finishing move leading into an execution. Be careful though, because if you mistime this attack, it is very hard to block an enemy's incoming attack no matter what direction it comes from. So now we get to talk about the Orochi's most used move, the Storm Rush. A seasoned Orochi uses this move like it's second nature and can quickly get into it and vary the speed. It's a useful opening attack and deadly finishing attack into an execution. and as stated earlier, is a great way to effectively use a top attack combo. The biggest difference between Storm Rush and Riptide Strike is that you can wait as long as you want in your Storm Rush stance for an opening in your opponent's guard. It is best to wait until your opponent actually attacks before going into a Storm Rush and releasing it immediately to take advantage of your opponent's now open body. This can get really tricky because you can either dodge back at the start of your opponent's attack and then release it immediately, because by the time your character gets back into the Storm Rush stance, your enemy will have already gone through with his attack and hopefully missed. Riptide Strike has a short pause that again can be used as a dodge when done right, but you cannot wait in that stance forever. Another difference is that Storm Rush attacks only come from left or right. There is no top attack version. Since the closed beta, the Storm attack has been slightly nerfed, but only in the sense that your opponent can now tell where your attack is coming from as you are running at them. However, a player who watches you properly can tell which direction you're coming from by looking at your stance and how you're holding your sword. Whenever you're in your hold stance, simply release the heavy attack button to actually attack. Storm Rush can be used in a multitude of ways. You can execute a move quickly by dodging back and tapping the heavy attack button, which again is useful when your opponent is attacking, or you can hold the heavy attack and wait for an opening either when your opponent moves in close enough, starts running at you, etc. But again, be careful. Storm Rush does have a distance limit. If your enemy is too far, you can miss completely, and like Riptide Strike, can leave you wide open for a devastating attack yourself. If you find that your opponent may be out of range from your Storm Rush, you want to take that and won't take the bait an inch closer, or if you recognize that they're guarding the correct side, you can cancel your attack by tapping the circle on PS4 or B on Xbox. It could be difficult to cancel if you try to attack from the left, so you can also unlock from your opponent for a second as well. You can cancel the attack right at the beginning of your running segment to feign the attack, but the window for canceling at the beginning of your run is fairly small, so you'll have to decide beforehand if you're going to cancel the attack or commit. Well, that's about it for the Storm Rush for now until we get into the demonstration part of the video. Now we can talk about some of the counter moves and my favorite move in general. But up first, let's talk about the Lightning Strike. Lightning Strike is a quick attack pulled off when dodging into your enemy. Simply push the left stick forward and the dodge button, X for PlayStation 4 or A for Xbox, followed by a quick attack. It will look very similar to the Zephyr Slash. This attack is useful to catch your opponents off guard. Now, the Zephyr Slash is arguably the most used or second most used attack by an Orochi player. It is quick, and though not an unblockable attack, nearly unblockable to most other characters but the Conqueror and Warlord. To pull it off, you must dodge either left or right and follow it with a quick attack. The damage from this attack is not as much as a normal quick attack, but enough of these will chip away at your enemy's health fairly quickly. This attack can also be followed up with a top light attack combo if your enemy does not recover quick enough. Now finally we get to talk about the two unblockable attacks that an Orochi player has at his disposal, and that are truly considered counterattacks. Both are almost identical in looks, but one is significantly stronger, but harder and to successfully pull off. These attacks are Wind Gust and Hurricane Blast. To do these attacks, one must have a grasp on your deflects talked about earlier, as the only way to execute these moves are to attack after a successful deflect. A successful deflect will be somewhat easy to notice, but still catch you off guard if you're not trying for one. You will see your sword scrape under your enemy's weapon and sparks flying. In order to deflect successfully, you must dodge in the direction of the incoming attack right before the attack hits you, or right when the red attack indicator flashes. Just think about it this way. You dodge at the same time you would parry an attack. So let's look at the Wind Gust first. This is an unblockable and nearly unstoppable attack, and is by far the most powerful light attack that you have at your disposal. It is a good way to catch your enemy off guard because most enemies, except for another seasoned Orochi, will not be expecting it. You can oftentimes follow this attack with another quick attack, or if you're really good about it, maybe even another top light attack combo. Finally, my favorite attack in the whole game, the Hurricane Blast. This is by far the Orochi's most powerful but most difficult attack. Again, you have to have a good grasp on your deflecting before you can pull this attack off. You must first deflect and follow it with a heavy attack. If pulled off successfully, the character will turn around with his back facing the enemy and stab straight into the enemy for massive damage. If you've played the Conqueror, the Hurricane Blast deals about the same amount of damage, maybe even more, as the Conqueror's fully charged heavy attack. I really like this attack, but it's really easy for enemies to avoid, even though it's an unblockable. A parry, dodge, or a well-timed guard break can avoid it. This attack is so cool, I oftentimes like using it as my execution. However, no, it will not prompt an execution if used to finish off an enemy, so he will be able to be revived. Also, the best time to use this attack is at the end of your enemy's combo or after a heavy attack when your enemy's recovery time is longer. So that's about it for the Orochi's moveset. Let me briefly mention one more attack that's not on the list but mentioned in the in-game Orochi videos. And that is the attack you can execute when you are surrounded. By pressing the light and heavy attack buttons at the same time, you can do a swiping attack that clears multiple enemies around you. This attack is actually not very useful outside of Zone B and Dominion mode, unlike the Kensei and the Conqueror's surrounded attacks. Alright, enough talk and looking at text. Let's get into practice and see it in action and some of the ways to guard against the Orochi. We will go through these quicker as I just retouched on some key points. Up first is the 3 light attack combo crosswind slashes. Remember with this that you can also use the top heavy attacks. Next is lightning strikes twice. That is 2 straight heavy attacks. Here's a couple of examples. You can do 2 straight down, you can do 1 from each side, you can do 1 straight down and 1 from each side, etc. The next is tidal wave slashes, which is a heavy attack followed up by 2 light attacks. You can tell that these are all chains because of the sword lighting up in blue. The next is crashing wave. You have to do this while not in guard. And then these are the Zephyr slashes that I've been talking about. That's the lightning strike. Another Zephyr slash. Storm rush from the right side. Notice that his sword is held backwards. Storm rush from the left side. His sword is held under his body. This here is the tidal wave or the Riptide strike. Another storm rush. These are all effective ways to use the Orochi. If you can mix these up as often as possible, that'll give you a good upper hand against your opponent. This here is the wind gust. You have to do that deflect, as you can see there. And it's just a quick R1 unblockable attack. This here is my favorite, the Hurricane Blast. This one, like I said before, is a very hard move to pull off. You usually have to pull this off at the end of a combo or at the end of a heavy attack. Look at how much damage that took as well. Now let's just see some more ways to use the Orochi. This is more this is against the level 1 bot, so I mean it's not going to be too difficult. This isn't going to actually be against another player as of right now, but I will show you some of that later. Notice how he was running towards me, and that was an opening. When your enemy is running towards you, that is an opening for you to use a Storm Rush. Some of these you can see that I dodged too late. I missed my dodge, and this is a perfect example of the Riptide Strike going into an execution prompt. Alright, this is also something you gotta look out for with the crashing wave. If you're running at an opponent and he's blocking, that crashing wave, all that momentum is gonna come back at you because it is blocked. You can see I was low health, so I just decided to start dodging a little bit more and go to my Zephyr strikes. Good way, and there you go. There you have the Wind Gust again off of the deflect. Like I said before, Wind Gust and Hurricane Blast are both unblockables, but Wind Gust is significantly easier to nail because it's a very quick. The Hurricane Blast, you actually have to see right there. Hurricane Blast, I was trying to do that, but the defender was able to hit me off of Hurricane Blast before I was able to tag. Let's look at a couple more examples before we get into the PvP stuff. Another deflect right there. Deflects are very hard, and I really don't suggest dodging into attacks like that, like I just did, like deflecting into the attack, because if you miss, you will get hit. Otherwise, unlike when you, there we go. See, look at that. That was the same wind or Hurricane Blast we had seen earlier, but I just showed it again. See, this is another example that you have to look out for when you're a little bit too far away to do the Storm Rush. The other guy can dodge, and then you have that attack from the Raider that can daze you. So you have to be careful with that. And again, he was running at me, so I was like, oh, Storm Rush time. Straight into a execution there. He had stopped dodging, or he stopped running at me before I actually released my heavy attack button, so that's why he blocked that. And see, there's another dodge right there. You have to really be careful with these Storm Rushes because they can leave you open. See right there, I dodged into it trying to do a deflect and I missed. If you dodge and you try and deflect left or right, and you miss, the best case scenario or the worst case scenario is still a dodge. And there we go. We got that Hurricane Blast that goes right into the finishing move. I love that as an execution, even though it's not technically an execution. Riptide Strike, he was running at me, and I was like, okay, I'm going to catch him off guard and dodge in, or go towards him with a dodge, and then do the Lightning Strike. See, I tried to deflect again. And then I was like, okay, I still got this. He's going to attack. By the time I get close enough to do the Storm Rush, he's going to be done with his attack. He was not. Blocked that again. See, I was able to cancel my Storm Rush because I had already killed the guy. Alright, now we have some PvP action. This is the Conqueror. This is what I was talking about earlier with the Conqueror's unblockable shield charge. They like to open up with that a lot, and so you have to be able to use a dodge in the Zephyr Slash. This team that we were playing, I mean, they weren't all that great, but there were some challenges. Conqueror and the Warlord are the most difficult people to fight, and there we go. I have a Storm Rush right into an execution. Here's a Raider. A lot of people don't know how to guard against a Storm Rush, especially if you see that they're like not very well experienced with their character. They're trying to more so learn the character versus actually defend against their opponent. Here's another. See, the Raider also has this charge that he can start with, but he was too far away from me, and I was like, I was going to use that to my advantage and go into a Storm Rush as my opening, and I connected with that. See, he was right in the middle of his heavy attack, wide open, exposing his abdomen when I actually attacked, so I was able to get him. This is where I use the sharpened blade. You can see that it inflicted bleed, and it actually deals a lot of damage whenever you have it, and then he goes off and he dies because of the bleed. I love it.
Thanks for the help.
Here we go again. He's trying to use his feet with this, which is the arrow, and like I said before, it's kind of a cheap move, but I was able to get to him with the Orochi's speed and nail him with that. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, that'll be it for this part. Let's go in and talk about how best to use and defend against the Orochi. Now that we've gone over all the attacks and the best ways to effectively use each one, it's time to go over how best to use the character. So in order to know how best to use a character, you have to understand it. Once again, the Orochi is the assassin class of the samurai and is the most agile and just as fast as the Nobushi. You must generally keep that in mind as you play as the character. Because of the nature of the assassin class, they are typically lightly armored, and in the case of the Knight's Peacekeeper, they are the weakest and lowest health of the Knights. In the beta, the Viking's Berserker is also the weakest, but one of the strongest in terms of attacks. But in the full game, they are the second weakest. Likewise, the Orochi is the second weakest to the Nobushi, but more agile, so it has superior dodging abilities. A good Orochi will use dodging more than blocking, as blocking and parrying are significantly harder. Utilize dodges and deflects together to use Wind Gust and Hurricane Blast when possible. Learn to effectively use Storm Rush quickly and at the right times at open areas. As you get used to Storm Rush, you should be able to change the attack side as you dodge backward to keep your opponent guessing as to where the attack is coming from. Granted, a seasoned player will know which way you're attacking no matter what, but those who are not familiar with fighting an Orochi will tend to block in the direction of where your indicator showed last. The same will be said for the Riptide Strike. Another thing to keep in mind is that because the Orochi is reliant on speed and agility, you should attack in the same way, with quick movements using the Zephyr Slashes on dodges and the top light attack combo, throwing quick Storm Rushes in the mix. Also play around with feigning Storm Rushes. A good way to feign a Storm Rush is by going into your Storm Rush stance and then canceling right at the beginning of your run forward, then dodge forward and use the Lightning Strike. This combination is a good way to really confuse your opponents, especially even seasoned Orochis if they haven't used this strategy either. It will look similar to a full Storm Rush if you do it this way, but it'll look just different enough for your enemy to wonder what the heck you just did. You also want to try and fight in open spaces rather than closed, especially if you plan on using Storm Rushes fairly often in the fight. You also need to make sure you have enough space needed to dodge safely away from attacks. The most difficult characters to fight as an Orochi are Conquerors and Warlords. Next would probably be the Wardens and Nobushi. When fighting Conquerors and Warlords, you have to be slow and methodical about it and mostly rely on dodging and Zephyr Slashes. Both characters have opening charging attacks that are typically easy to expect and see coming when you get used to it. You can easily dodge and counter both with Zephyrs. Zephyr Strikes are also a good way to calm nerves and get back into control of a losing fight. After landing a few Zephyrs off of multiple consecutive dodges, you can go from being on the brink of losing a fight to even. The Orochi's Zephyr Strike, though not its most powerful or versatile, is one of the most useful. A good Orochi will use these strikes often but will not spam it. I do, however, advise using this attack on most dodges. If your opponent thinks you're spamming because he keeps attacking you and you keep dodging and countering, that is on him. But I do not advise dodging to any side and using a Zephyr Strike out of no reason. Now that we've covered how best to use the Orochi, it's time to cover how best to defend one. Just like knowing how to fight with one, you must understand the type of character it is from a defensive perspective. We know that they are fast and agile. They specialize in dodging and countering, so the objective when fighting is to control the pace. Orochis have decent stamina but will tend to attack often and quickly once they get started. If you hold off against their attacks, they will start to Storm Rush more often, which depletes their stamina quicker, and if they don't use Storm Rush, they will oftentimes try random Zephyrs without dodging an attack. Also be wary of guard breaks, because Season 4 Honor players know how to guard break when their attacks don't work. However, unlike many other characters, Orochis have very weak and generally ineffective throws, so they are more likely to elect for a quick or heavy attack after guard breaking. dodge away from these. Now, with all of that being said, I struggled often with characters like the Warden, who are also fairly quick attackers. So quick and aggressive attacks are also a fairly decent strategy with some Orochis. But again, if you take that approach, you give the Orochi more attacks to dodge, leaving you open to more hits via the Zephyr Strike. Also, pay attention to the posture of the Orochi when it is back in the Storm Rush position. It is a giveaway to which direction the attack will come from. Again, you will not see which direction the attack will come from until he starts running at you. So pay attention to this posture. If the posture is closed with the blade under the body, then it is a left-sided attack. If the posture is more open and the Orochi is holding the blade backward and behind its body, the attack is a right-sided attack. Remember that there is no top attack for the Storm Rush. That's pretty much all the basics you need to defend against the Orochi. Well, there you have it, everybody. If you watched the whole video, you can now consider yourself a certified Orochi player. I know it was a bit long, but I wanted to be detailed. The Orochi can be tricky to learn, but most satisfying and fun once it is actually learned. I hope this helped you whether you were learning how to play as one or wanted to learn how best to fight against one. Please leave a like and a comment down below with suggestions of other characters I should do or any other questions regarding things I may not have covered. I do plan on making a video for the Kensei and hopefully the Conqueror when the full game releases. I also hope to make one for the Lawbringer and or the Valkyrie if I like them enough. As always, I thank you all for watching and see you all next time. Don't forget to subscribe for more For Honor content and hop over to Twitch to see me in action. Adios and peace until next time.